Looks like most folks have joined us, although I guess we're expecting more, but we will go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. It is 12:03. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this live Nuclear Innovation Alliance event in support of the publication of updated versions of the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Technology Primer and Company Compendium. My name is Ben Finzel. I'm president of Renew PR, celebrating 10 years this year. I have the pleasure and privilege of supporting NIA's communications efforts, and I will be the moderator for today's conversation. One of the NIA's principal activities is serving as an information resource for understanding the challenges and opportunities related to new nuclear development and deployment. Two of the premier resources they have developed to support that activity are the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Technology Primer and Company Compendium. These resources are updated annually by NIA staff. Later, we're going to hear from NIA's Zachary Koshgarian, who led the updating of the Primer and Company Compendium, and from Scott Koppel of BWX Technologies and Jeff Miller of TerraPower. But first, we're going to hear from NIA President and CEO Judy Greenwald. Judy's going to talk a bit about NIA and their work and also about today's event. So Judy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ben, and thanks everyone for joining us for this briefing. And it's, as Ben said, it's for the release of our most recent annual update to our Advanced Nuclear Technology Primer and Company Compendium. The advanced nuclear energy space is evolving rapidly, so it's hard to keep up. And today we're here to help you do just that. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about NIA. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan think and do tank, and we work to create the conditions for success for advanced nuclear reactors so they can play a major role as an energy security and climate solution. We played a leading role in informing major federal legislation and implementation to reform advanced reactor licensing at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and to expand and improve the Department of Energy's nuclear innovation efforts. We also collaborate with a broad group of stakeholders to coordinate advanced reactor technology advocacy in the United States. And we also do a lot of work with the business community and finance community to do education and engagement and make sure that the work that we're doing is helping both the private and the public sectors. NIA analyst Zach Koshgarian updated these NIA resources that we're highlighting today, and you'll hear from him shortly. After Zach, we'll be joined by two leading advanced reactor developers, TerraPower and BWXT, to update us on their recent progress on their innovative nuclear energy projects. We first released our Advanced Nuclear Reactor Technology Primer in September 2021, and we've updated it annually. It's a 101 document to demystify advanced nuclear reactors and explain the characteristics of the most common types and leading designs. The primer serves as a guide for media, policymakers, stakeholders, and anyone else who wants to understand the rapidly evolving nuclear energy space. We first released the Company Compendium in July 2022 as an introduction to the advanced reactor business ecosystem for potential investors and other key stakeholders. The compendium contains brief descriptions of many of the companies associated with the planning, design, testing, construction, supply chains, and operation of advanced nuclear energy projects. It also highlights leading advanced reactor developers and summarizes publicly available information on agreements between developers on the private sector, government, universities, and other organizations. The compendium is a helpful complement to the primer. The primer and the compendium will serve as the resources that you can use to understand the size, scope, and progress of advanced nuclear energy commercialization in the United States. And with that, I'll pass it back to Ben.
Thanks, Judy. Before we get into today's program, you can see the agenda on the screen here. Just wanted to highlight a couple things. After our discussion with NIA's Zach Koshgarian about what's in these resources, we're going to hear from Scott Koppel and Jeff Miller about what their companies are doing to develop new nuclear technologies and sort of the state of the industry, if you will. And after that discussion, we'll have an open Q&A. You are welcome to put questions in the little Q&A chat box right now if you'd like. And I'll do my best to answer them in the order in which they're received. And when you do type a question in, please be sure to list your name and your affiliation as well. That will be helpful to us. And if you'd like to see these new resources while Zach is talking about them, you can go to nuclearinnovationalliance.org, go to the resources tab, and they are right there for your reading pleasure. Now let's turn things over to Zach to bring us up to date on this year's updates of the primer and the company compendium. Zach.
Great, thanks so much, Ben. So yeah, like Judy was saying, the Primer and Compendium are NIA's premier resources that provide people with the knowledge and resources necessary to fully understand the different advanced reactor technologies, landscapes, and business ecosystems. We update these documents yearly to reflect the developments that occurred in the advanced nuclear space, and these changes typically include updated deployment timelines, regulatory status, different agreements signed between reactor developers and industrial partners or utilities, and finally we feature new advanced reactor companies on the scene. And notably for the primer this year, we added a section on Westinghouse's AP1000 reactor, and this section highlights both the completion of the Vogtle plant as well as the key developments to deploy more of these reactors here in the US. And again, as many of you know, the nuclear energy is it's a rapidly evolving commercial field with companies starting to build their supply chains and deploy their technologies. Now, there have been a lot of developments in the advanced nuclear space this year, and I won't be able to capture all of them in the time that we have, but I'll do my best to hit the highlights. And because we already have BWXT and TerraPower on the call, I won't touch too much on these. But some of the highlights this year include TerraPower receiving an accelerated construction permit application review schedule for their Natrium plant in Kemmerer, Wyoming. The accelerated review schedule was reduced the review timeline from about 26 months to 19 months. And BWXT made plenty of strides with the Department of Defense's Project Pele and its Banner project, along with a lot of progress on the advanced nuclear fuel side, which I'll let Scott talk a little more about later. Looking at deployment timelines, we update these yearly. So Holtec updated their expected deployment of the SMR 300 at Palisades to 2030. Kairos expects their demonstration reactor to deploy in 2027, with Hermes 2 deploying in 2030. Oklo expects to deploy their demonstration reactor at INL in 2027. TerraPower expects to operate their demonstration reactor in 2030. Westinghouse expects their eVinci reactor to be deployed in 2030. ARC Clean Technologies expects their Port LaPro demonstration project to deploy in 2029 and their Portobello Doom project to deploy as well in 2029. BWXT expects their Banner project, which is a high temperature gas reactor, to deploy in the early 2030s, with Project Pele, a transportable high temperature gas microreactor, to deploy in 2027. And lastly, just looking at GE Hitachi's BWRX 300 is expected to deploy in Darlington, Canada by 2030, as construction of the first BWRX 300 was approved by the province of Ontario and OPG earlier in May this year. On the financial front, nuclear energy is now being supported by both major businesses and financial institutions as a key source of energy for demand growth and energy security, in addition to meeting climate goals. Allo Atomics, which is a microreactor developer that's building a 10 megawatt reactor inspired by INL's Marvel reactor, recently announced it had secured $100 million in Series B funding. Google recently signed a power purchase agreement with Kairos Power to deliver 50 megawatts from their Hermes 2 reactor. And lastly, looking stateside, another key highlight on financing new nuclear was Texas enacting HB 14 earlier this year, which allocates $350 million to establish advanced nuclear energy projects in the state. And looking at some of the highlights on the regulatory front, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission issued the final environmental impact statement for the construction permit application for Kemmerer Power Station Unit 1 in October. In July, the NRC accepted for review a construction permit application from Tennessee Valley Authority to build a GE BWRX 300 small modular reactor at TVA's Clinch River site that's near Oak Ridge, Tennessee. In May, the NRC approved NuScale's standard design for its upgraded 77 megawatt power module. Also in May, the NRC approved Westinghouse's eVinci's principal design criteria topical report. And for those of you who don't know, the principal design criteria defines a reactor's design basis and ensures that the design conforms to the design basis outlined in NRC regulations. And a last highlight is that X-Energy received an accelerated construction permit application review schedule from the NRC in June, which reduces the review timeline from about 30 months down to 18 months. So hopefully by this time next year, we'll have some construction permit applications approved and we'll get some shovels in the ground. And, again, all these updates and more you can find within our primer and compendium, which are, again, as Ben said, now live on our website. And ultimately, we hope that these resources will be valuable and helpful to the public and policymakers, and really just a broad group of stakeholders engaging in advanced nuclear energy innovation, commercialization, and investment. So now that we've covered the updated resources, I'm happy to pass it back to Ben, who will introduce the panel that we've gathered here today. So Ben, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Zach. And wow, you and Judy weren't kidding when you said there's a lot going on. My goodness, that was almost hard to keep up with all of the developments. It's really impressive, and these are really useful resources. And I'm sure our audience watching today and watching on the recording later will find them helpful in the months ahead. Now let's hear from some of the industry leaders who are doing the work that Zach and Judy just talked about. We're going to start with Scott Koppel, the Senior Director of Government Relations for BWX Technologies. And Scott will be followed by Jeffrey Miller, the Vice President of Business Development at TerraPower. And Scott and Jeffrey are each going to share a bit about their companies and what they're working on in relation to what's included in the primer and the company compendium. We're going to have Scott start and then turn it over to Jeffrey, and then I will come back when they're done and we'll get into the Q&A. So Scott, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ben, and thank you, NIA, for hosting us and for having this. And I think just the list that Zach rattled off there, I think that alone is why we need these documents. I know Ben during Q&A is going to ask a couple leading questions to help get things going, so I'll save those comments for later. But a little bit about BWXT for those who might not know us. Our origins go back to the 1850s with Babcock and Wilcox and the water tube boiler and steam production. A rich and interesting history of the company, everything from providing the power for Thomas Edison's laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, to providing the steam for the New York City subway system, to even helping power Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet. Fast forward to the 1950s and Admiral Rickover's vision of the nuclear navy. We were there from the beginning in supporting the USS Nautilus. Really, the backbone of BWXT is the nuclear navy and producing the reactors for every submarine and aircraft carrier. And so we like to say we do everything, including the fuel, except for the pumps and valves. And that is sort of a grounding force and line of sight for us as a business to keep the lights on, keep everything going, and this allow us to explore in other areas such as Pele, as well as Banner, which I know we'll touch on later. About 10 years ago, we pivoted and created a new BWXT, which is the company you have today. It's about 10,000 folks. Again, produce every reactor for the nuclear navy. That's between 5 plants here in the US. And then we also have some of the last heavy manufacturing left in North America in our BWXT Canada branch. And we're supporting both for example, GE Hitachi, as well as TerraPower. So it's great to have Jeff here on the call with us today too. So we also have a DOE, we call technical services business. So we lead the operations at NNSA's Pantech site. We're part of the Savannah River, Hanford, and West Valley sites. We're also part of Lawrence Livermore Lab and Idaho National Laboratory and those LLCs and management teams. Finally, and closer to home for the subject today, our Advanced Technologies Group is home to Project Pele, our space nuclear programs, as well as our Banner civil-focused microreactor. For generally speaking, I think of it as for process heat behind the meter applications. But putting that all that aside, all that background, I think thinking globally, we, BWXT, are trying to enable and support the industry more broadly while also pursuing our own products and objectives. We feel like, and the compendium and the primer sort of speak to this, that the size of the prize out there is large enough for everyone in the room with their different approaches, and there should be many winners in this. We're seeing really unprecedented times in terms of bipartisan support and sort of a will to go forward on nuclear. What we don't need is everyone sort of, undercutting one another, because if anyone fails, it's really going to hurt the entire industry and all the momentum and the wind that's currently at our backs. And then maybe a final comment here, just as part of my opener, is, and I'll do my best to paraphrase our CEO, Rex Geveden. He said this a number of times publicly. Basically, the US has to win the AI race. This is absolutely critical for our national security. And to win the race, we need to win the power race to support those activities and the hyperscalers that are pursuing it. And the best way to win that race and achieve that energy dominance is with nuclear technologies. So whether it's gigawatt scale or micro reactors or, SMR somewhere in between, we have to be successful here in the U.S. If we're going to go forward. And again, so I think I'll pause there. I think I'm supposed to turn it over to Jeff. I'm not sure if it goes back to you, Ben, first, but I look forward to the Q&A and getting into it.
Yep, we're going back to Jeff. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. And thanks to the NIA for having me here. This is the second time I've participated in an event like this, and I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about TerraPower and to engaging in the discussion. And relative to TerraPower, let me start at the top by saying that we were founded back in 2008 by Bill Gates and some of his former Microsoft colleagues. And he and they had a vision to create a company that would help solve some of the world's toughest challenges, which for us include energy security, climate change, energy poverty, and contributing to global health. And so those are the missions that we anchor around, and we are very much a mission-driven company. And we have two sides to our business. We have an energy side and a health side. And on the health side, I just take a minute just to say that we are a company that's engaged in the fight against cancer, and we're producing a key radioisotope that is unlocking a new generation of cancer treatments in the United States and globally. That isotope is called actinium-225, and the therapies are called targeted alpha therapies. And suffice it is to say, our actinium is in human trials right now in the United States, soon to be in Europe, and we're shipping product weekly to big pharma in the United States and around the globe. And relative to energy, we are a nuclear technology development company and a nuclear innovation company. So we're bringing two technologies to the market. We're bringing natrium to the market. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we're bringing a second technology, the molten chloride fast reactor, to the market as well. And that one is a late 2030s commercialization technology that can help with decarbonization in the maritime sector, in addition to having on land or terrestrial use cases. And then for natrium, we're in a partnership with the U.S. Department of Energy called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. That's a 50-50 cost share project where the Department of Energy is putting in a grant of $2 billion and our investors are putting in $2 billion to deliver a sodium fast reactor with built-in energy storage in a town called Kemmerer in Wyoming. And we are bringing to market, as I just mentioned, a sodium fast reactor with built-in energy storage. We took from the concentrating solar industry the energy storage tanks that they have, where they capture the energy from the sun in the form of molten salt. And we merged that with our nuclear technology to create the world's first built-in storage system. And the benefit of that for us is that we can dispatch power, steam, and heat from our commercial power delivery systems, and we do not load follow from our reactor, which is a different architecture than the reactors that are currently on the market of our size, 345 megawatt electric or larger, or those that are coming to market. We're probably within 3 months away from getting our construction permit in Kemmerer, Wyoming. That means the permission to pour nuclear concrete, and we're on track for 2030 fuel loading and full power to the grid in 2031. And we are in the process of scaling up our business in the 2030s as well for natrium, in a number of discussions with utilities in the United States, as well as industrial and hyperscalers. And we're also looking at a few early international markets as well, including the UK, where we announced our intention to enter the licensing process there about 2 weeks ago. So I should probably stop there and just thank you for the opportunity to talk about TerraPower a little bit, and I'm looking forward to participating in the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, Jeffrey and Scott, thank you both very much. And nuclear may be hot, but that was a really cool update. There is a lot going on. And for anyone who says there's no action or not enough progress, just take a listen to two of our speakers here. And and also what Judy and Zach were just sharing. It's so helpful to hear what's actually going on, what you guys are thinking about, what you're working on. We're going to talk more about that in the Q&A, which we are ready for now. So to get things started, I will ask a couple questions, but for those of you in the audience watching us today, if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A box, and I'll answer them as best I can in the order we get them. And please remember to include your name and your affiliation as well as your question. But to get things started, a question for Scott and Jeffrey. So from your perspective, just thinking about all the work that you just outlined so quickly for us, why are the primer and the compendium valuable, and how do you think folks should use them? And either one of you can start.
I'm happy to go first. It's just real quick on this one. I think it's what NIA has here is a really valuable resource. It's almost a catalog of sorts for potential end users, regardless of what your energy needs are, what your business is, but in the recognition of nuclear as a possible solution. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, it also shows the excitement and interest in new nuclear to solve, generally these energy challenges, that we've touched on already. It's also one size doesn't fit all. There's many different solution sets, different, whether it's megawattage all the way up to, an AP1000 type reactor, but again, but these underlying technologies, they require considerable capital investment, both whether it's from private money, public traded companies investing their own CapEx, which would be like in BWXT's case, but also the government support, which includes both the executive branch and Congress. So really, it's again, I kind of think of it two ways. It's on one hand, it's almost again a menu for potential end users that are thinking about nuclear as a possible solution, and we've seen a lot more of that in recent years. And then it's also this signal of all the activity that's going on, and to satisfy that demand from the potential end user. So yeah, that's how I see these docs. They're very valuable and well done.
Thanks, Scott. Jeff, thoughts?
Yes, I'll just add on to that and probably be brief because I don't want to repeat what Scott has already said, but I think both of the documents taken together give a nice laydown on the different types of technology, options that are out there for use cases, and really highlight the potential for partnerships, in the nuclear sector, and also the potential for commercialization of, in particular, in our case, advanced reactor technologies. And also, we're a company that requires a HALEU, high assay, low risk uranium, and certainly there's some good discussion on fuel supply and innovations, related there too, in the documents taken together, and highlighting the importance of scaling up, as in particular, fuel supplies for the advanced generation market. So yes, just to echo what Scott said, we definitely think both documents are valuable, and we appreciate them and the content.
Thank you both. One final question before we open it up, and I see there is one question in the chat. As a reminder, you also use the Q&A as well if you can. Just for both of you, Scott and Jeff, I'm interested in what is of the list of things that you guys talked about, and they're both really long. What's especially new and exciting? What do you want to underline? What do you want to come back to from what you just did in the description in terms of what's most important for folks to think about right now for your respective companies? And that may be a hard thing to do, so list a couple if you want. Scott, you can go first. You look like
sure. Yeah, I was kind of pointing to Jeff, but we're not in the same room. So like, if you want to go first. So yeah, so I'll run through kind of a sort of a list here as best I can. So again, I said this earlier, but 2025 has been a really solid year for nuclear in general. Sort of started with not quite the beginning of the year, but the 4 White House executive orders kind of put a flag down and signal to industry we want to do things faster as well as more efficiently. So while there's still some of the details to be worked out, there's a lot of forward movement. And one of the things, sort of circling back to the BWXT question Ben asked, so, one of the things the executive orders do is they specifically call out expanding nuclear options for DoD. the announcement of the Army's Project Janus about a month ago or so. I'm not sure if it's quite a day to the month ago, but it's close. Teaming with DIU to support base power for resilient on-demand power options makes a ton of sense. So this leads me to Project Pele. We've learned a lot along the way since we began the project for a transportable microreactor for DoD's purposes. But it is great to share here for those who aren't aware. We began manufacturing of the Pele transportable microreactor in July. I see pictures every now and then from our folks in Lynchburg, and it is incredible to see this starting to come together with real hardware. Assuming funding and support continue, our plans to deliver the reactor to INL in 2027 for fuel loading and testing. We've also completed the Pele, the TRISO fuel for Pele, and that's ready to go. So that's another exciting element of that project more broadly. I think most folks know we're a heavy defense, national security type of business. We have a number of partnerships with NNSA, including this year a new contract to support unobligated enrichment through NNSA's DUCE program, or RNL. Oak Ridge National Lab is the design authority. Earlier this year, very early in the year, we acquired a new business in Jonesboro, Tennessee, sort of between Oak Ridge and Johnson City, Irwin area, to work to do for depleted uranium. So both for DoD and high purity depleted uranium, which NNSA has an interest in. So this leverages on our vast experience in uranium processing. And what this also now gives us, we can now make the claim that we work with all enrichments, from depleted uranium to LEU to HALEU to HEU. So that's something we're very proud to share and to boast about a little bit. On the civil side, and I touched a little on this earlier, we're partnered with several SMR developers to supply some of their heavy components, including GE, as well as the heat exchangers for TerraPower's Natrium reactor. So, it's kind of fun to share the stage with someone we're working with in Ben's company. And then the last thing I'll say as far as for us is we also have this, I guess, while not working together per se, but we both have a Wyoming interest as companies. They've clearly, as a state, have shown they're open for business. So while they have their Caramir project going with Natrium, we've been working with the trona mining industry and through the Wyoming Energy Authority to possibly provide a number of Banner reactors to meet their needs. This gets back to the process heat behind the meter demand. And then we're also looking at potential fuel facility options. Nothing has been set in stone. There's not a done deal in that regard, but we're quite serious about it as we watch the demand curve and market sort of order book potentially build in that direction and figuring out where we go next. So it's exciting times for certainly for the industry and certainly for us.
Thanks, Scott. Jeff.
Cool. Ben, would you remind me of your question? Because
Sure.
I just want to make sure I answer it properly here.
Just to highlight, sort of pick out what's new and exciting
for
TerraPower among my goodness, the list you gave, it all sounded exciting to me, but if there's anything you want to underline or sort of come back to put a pin on for folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we are, just to start in Wyoming, we're working really hard to deploy there. We are right now, we have an active job site in the United States, and we are building 2 critical facilities for ourselves there right now. One is a test facility, which is key for our technology de-risking program. And then we're building our training facility, which will house our simulator and be integral part of our operator training that is already ongoing right now, pointed toward our fuel load and operations in the early 2030s. And once we get the permission to pour nuclear concrete, which, as I mentioned, will be in the next couple of months, we'll be in a position to start nuclear construction on the site, which we are currently eyeing for 2026, in addition to the energy island, which we have already planned to be engaging in 2026. And then we're also rolling out a number of announcements throughout the United States. I mean, you might have noticed one in Kansas recently with Evergy and the Kansas government. We made an announcement in Utah with a landowner developer partner flagship and also the Utah government. So we're looking at sites not only in the Midwest and the Rocky Mountain West, but the East Coast. There will be some announcements coming out as well. So we're building a pretty big book in the 2030s, and we see we've done a tremendous amount of economic modeling on ourselves, right? And the fact that we're a low pressure system and how that system and the fact that we can have an accelerated construction schedule like stacks up and compares with, light water reactor technology of our size and even larger. And we really like where we sit in the market. We like to point to the TVA IRP of 2024 that actually listed us as the lowest cost nuclear out there, and that's a documented fact. So that really gave some good credence to the work we've done. And so on top of that, we're really working hard on the supply chain. I mean, Scott referenced BWXT's role. We're very appreciative of our relationship with BWXT and also interested in some onshoring, scenarios as well that we're looking at. But for our nuclear island, which is the part of our supply chain that TerraPower um, controls, versus the energy island where our partner Bechtel is working on that in partnership with us. In Wyoming, we've already made all of the major awards, and we're well into long leads and in some cases fabrications for prototyping right now. And that's probably the most advanced supply chain I would guess out there right now um, for advanced nuclear, and that includes not only international companies, but wherever possible, U.S. companies, so that we can continue to bring the benefits of our technology home to America, not only from the standpoint of electrons on the grid, but also economic development in the regions where we're implementing. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And I want to just point
Mhm.
out, Scott referenced the DoD, the Department of Defense. NIA has a new paper on the role of the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and NRC in terms of federal oversight of advanced nuclear. So while you're on the NIA website, scroll down below the primer and compendium, and you'll see that report if you're interested as well. Now, we're starting to get some questions, which is great. I'm going to start with the ones we have in the Q&A box. The first is from a man who needs no introduction, Matt Wald. Hi, Matt. And Matt is asking, Seth Cohen of DOE said yesterday at the American Nuclear Society winter meeting that the industry shouldn't need help getting HALEU started, that suppliers should just jump in to meet anticipated demand. Do you agree? And what's your level of confidence that HALEU will be available when needed? And I think everyone on this call knows that HALEU is high assay low enriched uranium, but just in case, that's what we're talking about. So do you agree? And what's your level of confidence that HALEU will be available when needed? Jeff, Scott, Zach, Judy, someone want to jump in on that one?
Uh, I'm happy to start since Scott has kindly started the last two, and I'm assuming that others will have comments. But just because we're a HALEU reactor, we're in the market. I'm just going to make a couple of comments. I mean, first is that the DOE program for HALEU availability is laudable, and when the money is available and allocated and enrichers are moving, it's going to be really great for the market. But in the meantime, we're loading fuel in 2030 in Kemmerer, and we need our HALEU for our first core in 2028. And so this is an example of part of our overall program where we've taken some commercial initiative. And it's certainly not the only part of our program where we've done that. And we've went out and checked the market ourselves and determined who could be there for us in 2028 and who can't. And we made a 10-year offtake contract with a company called ASP Isotopes, which is a U.S. NASDAQ listed company with first HALEU production coming from South Africa. And that's an announcement that's been on our website for quite some time. And we also have, in terms of our fuel cycle, three legs of our stool, right? We need HALEU, we need it to be metallized because we're a metal fuel reactor, and we need fuel fabrication. So all three of those are have relationships that are moving right now toward producing. in concert in 2028. Metallization is with Framatome. And I think it was last week we put out an announcement with Framatome that they have metallized the first uranium for us, depleted uranium, but the first one nonetheless using the same system that they will use for the commercial production that should be available in 2028. And then we have GNF, Global Nuclear Fuels, in Wilmington, North Carolina, making our fuel, and that is also in process right now. So the short answer is we're starting the HALEU market for ourselves because that's what it takes to launch by 2030. And we have confidence that our fuel cycle will be available. And we also have confidence that the market for HALEU will be more liquid in the 2030s and eventually will be a similar market to what the low enriched uranium market is right now worldwide.
Thanks, Jeff. Scott.
Yeah, sure. Just I think he covered it well as an end user that's been looking at this for quite a while. So, I wish we had one of the enrichers on the line to jump in here. One of the things we're doing and we're a part of it's a HALEU recovery program through material that's come from Y12, and we're doing that through an NNSA contract. And putting it into a ready state that can be basically feedstock available for a fuel fabricator for the types of reactor vendors like a TerraPower. And we're doing that, again, I said it's an NNSA contract, but the intent is for really these advanced reactor end users. It's not our material, similar like naval reactors, it's not our material, but we are processing it, cleaning it up, getting it into a state that's ready to hopefully help seed the marketplace so some of these folks can begin to actually test their reactors. Because, I think one thing is you don't need everything all at once up front. And, we have some capacity too. So if there's more material available that needs processing, we're happy to take that on if NNSA and DOE sees continued value in it, which I believe they do. And then we also, we're us and many others, several others, I should say, in the nuclear supply chain, we can support with deconversion services, which is obviously a needed piece of the puzzle if you follow the nuclear fuel cycle. So, depending on where you sit in that supply chain, there's different places where you can plug in. I think there is, obviously there's been a lot of bipartisan support from Congress. My math might be off, but depending on how you shake it out, it's over maybe $3 billion when you put LEU and HALEU together. I'm not quite sure if that was ever broken up, by one or the other, but obviously you're going to need LEU to get to HALEU, and obviously LEU is needed as well for the reactor fleet that operates on less than 5%. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and we're very hopeful. It's a great question to ask, and again, I would defer to possibly the enrichers who aren't here today. But certainly, I know they're all looking at this really hard because it's something that needs to be resolved, and there seems to be a business case for moving forward. But again, I don't want to speak necessarily for others.
Scott, thank you. And Judy, you came off mic, so go right ahead.
I'll say a little bit about this. So in the United States, energy system innovation is private sector led and government enabled. And we actually need both the government and the private sector to take action, particularly now in this sort of early stage of developing, particularly a domestic U.S. enrichment capacity. And it's very capital intensive, and there's a lot of chicken and egg problems. If somebody makes a very big investment and they don't know exactly how many buyers they're going to have, it can be very difficult. And that's why Congress has authorized and appropriated several $billion for the Department of Energy to work with the private sector to stand up a domestic U.S. enrichment capability with a lot of emphasis on HALEU, where we have the most particular problem where there are very few suppliers globally and, dominated by Russian state-owned enterprise. So we really need the government to do this investment, we need the government to do it quickly. We need them to do it smartly in conjunction with the private sector. And we also need the private sector to step up and be willing to make investments and commitments to actually buy this material. And we need to make that happen over time. We expect that over time, this would be a wholly private activity, but during this transition, when we really need to make sure, because we have national security imperatives and other imperatives, we have to make sure that we have a domestic enrichment capacity, and we also have to make sure that we have robust private sector actors who can take it from there.
Thank you, Judy. And if you're curious to know more about NIA's work on HALU, again, go to the resources page and type HALU into the search box, and you'll see the work that NIA has done on that, including a paper from January of this year. We have a couple more questions here. So Dan Yerman from Neutron Bytes is asking if the first quarter 26 timeline is the date for the final NRC commission decision for a construction license. And he's saying, what is your time frame? And I'm not sure, I assume he's applying that to TerraPower, but he doesn't say. What is your time frame for applying for an operating license? So I'm guessing that's to you, Jeff, but it's a little hard to tell from Dan's question.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so we do expect to get our construction permit, the permission to pour nuclear concrete from the NRC in the next few months. That is a significant acceleration. And we were accelerated twice, once before Donald Trump's second term, based upon a lot of the work we had done in advance of our licensing, our construction permit application with the NRC in terms of pre-meetings and just understanding, common language on our technology with the NRC. And then, of course, following the executive orders, we were accelerated once again. So that's number one. And then number two, on the operating license, our plan is to file for that operating license in 2028 timeframe, so that we'll have it in time for our startup of Kemmer Unit 1. And we're on track right now, of course, for the construction permit, but also to file that operating license under 10 CFR Part 50.
Great, thank you. And Dan, if you have follow-up questions, please just stick them in the Q&A there and we'll follow up with them. Now, a question from Rob Sweeney. And Rob, I'm sorry, I don't know what organization you're with. I'm sure I should know, but I don't. And you say, Jeff, great input. A quick follow-up question. You mentioned a number of things that have begun regarding prototyping certain technology that supports the natrium reactor. Can you expand on that, including which ones are reactor and or fuel related?
Yeah, so for the reactor side, we have a number of vendors in our supply chain, both domestic and international, and we're at different phases of project execution with each one of those vendors. But once we have our test facility stood up on site, our test and fill facility, we will begin taking the prototypes from key vendors and full scope components as well, and testing them under sodium, at temperature before we put them in our reactor. That will start happening in 2027. And on the fuel side, we have for many years had a fuel development and qualification program. We have several types of fuel we're bringing to market that are part of our short, medium, and long-term plan, and uh, different materials associated with those. But HALU is the common thread, and the first fuel that we'll use in Kemmerer will be the same fuel that DOE was using for its program, which already has a solid technical and licensing basis associated with it for discussion and ultimately approval with the NRC.
Great, thank you. So I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box, so please type them in. But while we're waiting for more questions, I'm going to ask another one. And I'm going to ask it of Jeff, but certainly, Scott, if you have thoughts about this, you're welcome to weigh in. So Jeff, I'm wondering how TerraPower thinks about AI load growth and how that might impact your business development strategy? Obviously, there's lots of chatter in the national discussion right now about AI driving demand for new energy. So I'm just curious how that impacts your strategy.
Mhm. Yeah, so we absolutely see the growing need for power to meet AI demand. We're in touch with all of the major hyperscalers, as well as the neo clouds that are part of NVIDIA's ecosystem, having NVIDIA investing in our company last summer. And so when we look around the country for areas where we would want to deploy Natrium units, in discussions with some of our strategic utility partners, we are certainly considering the overlay of where AI and hyperscaler companies want to be, and engaging in the discussions with them on how we can work together, to meet their power needs and to scale our technology and drive down our costs to the most competitive level at the same time.
Thank you. Scott, do you want to add anything about AI?
No, I think I touched on it earlier, sort of quoting my big boss. It's coming, it's real. I know we just as a company in general are figuring out all the ways, how do we integrate it into our daily business? It's just even the functional areas. How can we do things better, more efficiently, more cost effective? Can you cut out steps along the way? It's coming and it's real. And nuclear seems to be a very logical and deliberate choice that can be made to meet the AI challenge, and the U.S. needs to win that ultimately.
Thanks, Scott. Judy, do you want to add anything, or Zach, just about AI before I move on?
No, I think we could mention our AI paper that we did in conjunction with Pennsylvania. I don't know if that's something you want to put in the chat, Ben, or Zach, you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I can just say a couple words. I mean, I focus mainly on state policy, and this is a conversation that keeps coming up a lot in the state level, is that you have hyperscalers, continuing to develop in states, and the conversations around data center development are very real. So the next question kind of becomes, how do you power these? So I worked with a local NGO in Pennsylvania about how the different options to power data centers, and have cutting out a lot of the weeds of the paper. The cornerstones of powering data centers are going to be nuclear, just because of the clean, firm power that they provide. And nuclear power should be seriously considered as states start to consider data center development.
And we're going to do a follow-up note to everyone with a link to this recording. So maybe to Judy's point, we can also share a link to the Pennsylvania paper and all the other ones we've mentioned. I want to ask a question of Scott as well. Scott, you talked about SMRs earlier, and I'm just curious, major barriers you see for commercial SMR deployment. And you can talk about licensing or supply chain or financing or all of the above. And then also how BWX Technologies is positioning the company to overcome those.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a number of areas. And I guess maybe before getting into like the potential barriers or issues or challenges, I wanted to start with, and maybe the government relations guy here in DC, about what's not a barrier anymore. It doesn't seem to be. It is amazing to me how nuclear has become this sort of cross-cutting, nonpartisan or bipartisan issue through everything else. Turn on the news, everything that's gone on the last couple months, and nuclear is just kind of become there. And it's amazing how the middle has grown. I can tell you, as someone who spends a lot of my time on Capitol Hill, how the aperture and the acceptance and even just the interest alone on nuclear has grown dramatically. And maybe an office isn't going to per se help you out or co-sponsor a piece of legislation, but they're interested, they're not against it, they're willing to hear you out. And we have come a long way, with as far as nuclear goes politically. So that's been a real sea change. I think when I think of challenges or barriers or things that need to happen, I think first of all, we collectively, industry-wide, we need to build something and we need to turn it on, and it's got to work. I think that ultimately will send the signal to really everyone, but that this is real, whether it's the investors area, the policymakers, the regulators. It really covers the waterfront, the general public. I think also, we hear the term, order book or marketplace a lot, and that will ultimately, assist the supply chain, but it can't be a one and done. That's not a business. Someone's not going to go off and start making a particular widget, and necessarily turn a profit if it's just one time, one thing. So they've got to be able to see sort of the longevity and hopefully growing backlog in that. As far as supply chain goes, we have learned a lot of lessons on supply chain with Project Pele. Some things have been more challenging than others. Some things have been easier than maybe we might have thought when we embarked on Pele. We're moving at a really fast pace when you think about it. So there's a lot of lessons learned there that we're employing and obviously sharing with our customer as well. So another area I think in general is also just workforce. It's not just the advanced degree engineers, it's the data scientist, it's not in the data scientists, it's also the hands-on technicians and machinists. Are there jobs where you really only need a 2-year degree versus a 4-year degree? So on one hand, we work with some of the big universities that have strong nuclear programs. Just recently announced an MOU with Purdue, just for example, but we work with many universities because they're a wonderful pipeline for us. And also, in some cases, they can actually perform some R&D that has a real transferable what's the right word? But it provides a great resource to us in terms of applied science. That's what I was looking for. But we also work with community colleges, and helping them figure out their curriculums. And, so yes, it's a pipeline as well. But these are nuclear's good paying jobs, and they're good paying jobs in most, if not all, of these communities where we're looking at potential new builds, whether it's advanced reactors or other areas of nuclear. So I think those are some things. I mean, there's a lot of capital flying around. That's a really good thing. But in order to be successful and sustain that investment, we've got to build something, or some things, I hope, plural, from several developers. We've got to turn them on. And I think that'll just sort of open the floodgates. It's much more of a pull than a push in the last couple of years for those of us sitting on this side of the equation. So, and I touched on the EOs earlier in the discussion. They are great launching points, and some of the things that DOE through the EOs is offering. Just a testing apparatus, or using DOE facilities and property to help buy down some of that risk, using a DOE safety basis. I mean, that's essentially what I could argue we've test driven, or we're test driving today with Pele. It's a similar setup. We're proving it can be done. So that's a great way to kickstart a project, to get it going with the government's in this DOE support, and that's greatly appreciated. So, Ben, I think somewhere in there I answered your question. At least that was my goal, but I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Judy, do you want to add anything from NIA's perspective on SMR before I go to the rest of the questions?
No, you can do one more. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So Matt Wald is asking, construction of large light water reactors never followed planned schedules. Why will your projects avoid these delays? So pretty pointed and direct question there, and I'm sure both of you have answers. Either one of you like to go first?
I'll just say a few words, if that's all right. I mean, let me just come back to where I started with our architecture for 1 second. We are a low pressure system. That's number one. All of our safety systems are underground. That's number two. Number three, our commercial power delivery systems are not under NRC auspices, which means from the perspective of nuclear construction, we have more flexibility on that side of our plant. All of these things add up to us benchmarking natural gas and combined cycle plants in terms of how we're constructing our reactor, not only in terms of the components and the parts going in, but also in terms of the number of craft workers on site. So that's a markedly different situation from Vogel or other light water constructions that have or will come to the market this decade and next. And the other thing is, and I think all vendors would say what I'm about to say, which is that we are going to have our design finalized before we start construction, so that we can avoid some of the things that, from a lessons learned perspective, impacted Vogel and caused cost and schedules to spiral there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Scott, you want to add anything quickly
Yeah,
before we?
yeah, I think lessons learned, as I mentioned, with things we learn as we go, and we build things for a living, and know how to do this. But I think also we think about it, there's sort of this modular approach, which also means you can test as you go. There's all the different subsystems before you bring them together. Just an example for us, so we invested in ourselves. We have what we call the BWXT Innovation Campus, which is adjacent to our Lynchburg, Virginia Cat 1. Just literally go out the main road and come back around, and it's right there. So we can sort of take things certainly from a fuel standpoint, from the BIC, as we call it, where there's no fuel or no material or surrogate type material, to what we call our Lynchburg Technology Center, which think of it more like a Cat 3. And then we can actually move into the Cat 1. So from a fuel development side, and that saves cost and time and moving things. The other things we're doing is bringing things in-house, laboratory services and those kinds of things where you can have a fast turnaround. So you can learn as you go, but not sitting around waiting for, say, a sample to come back with some kind of new material or way of doing things that, maybe haven't been done before. That could be a novel approach. Because ultimately what we want to do is we need to shrink the cost. This is all about cost and shrinking the cost, but it still needs to be manufacturable. Because if you can't manufacture it, you're not going to deploy anything. So all this comes together. So that's sort of a high level view of how we look at things, of ways to hopefully learn. But I think Jeff nailed it. There's a lot of lessons learned out there, and we all can learn from each other.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And I'll just point out that several of you mentioned workforce. If you are interested in workforce and sort of some of the challenges with that, go to the NIA website and look up the Nuclear Innovation Bootcamp. Lots to learn there about efforts to build a workforce. That's going to have to be it for questions. Somehow we have run through an hour already. So Mark, Gerard, Albert, we will follow up with you by email since we didn't get to your question. But Judy was going to share a couple final thoughts before we wrap up. So Judy, over to you again.
Sure. Thanks so much to everyone for coming. Every time we do one of these updates, we learn so much new because the space is so rapidly evolving. We hope you've learned as well, and we're going to keep at it. There is so much going on in this space, lots of different projects. We're very excited about the portfolio of projects, different use cases, different types of companies, different degrees of government involvement, and different degrees of private sector involvement, and different sizes. So it's a real interesting portfolio, lots of progress being made every day. And we're really excited to recognize that progress, share it with you, and we're going to keep it up. And we hope that you'll keep being able to use these types of resources in your work. So thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And that is it for another NIA webinar. I hope this conversation has been helpful to you. And I encourage you to download the primer and the company compendium from the NIA website. Again, that's nuclearinnovationalliance.org. You should also follow the NIA on LinkedIn as well for timely updates on their work and perspective on news of the day. But for now, please join me in thanking our special guests, Scott Koppel and Jeffrey Miller, for joining us today. So on behalf of Judy Greenwald and Zach Koshgarian and the entire NIA team, thanks for your interest in advanced nuclear reactor technologies, and thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you online again soon for our next webinar, and watch your email for those invitations. Have a great day.